What is it about music that moves us so deeply? I see it walking around campus. Students move between classes with headphones or earbuds in, lost in their own music. A head bob, a shift in the shoulders, a rhythm in the walk. They don't need to be taught what the music means. They feel it. A song begins and the body responds before the mind catches up. No instruction required. Music reaches us directly. That may be why Walter Pater famously said, "All art constantly aspires towards the condition of music." In music, form and feeling are almost impossible to separate. The sound is not just carrying the meaning, the sound is the meaning. And maybe that is what art at its best seeks. To become more than a thing in front of us, to become an experience. But even powerful art can be blocked by habit. I hear this all the time from art students. They look at a painting, a sculpture, a strange modern artwork, or something from a culture far removed from their own, and say, "I don't like it." Then they usually add, "I know what I like." That sounds reasonable, confident, honest, practical, but sometimes I suggest moving the words around. Maybe what we really mean is, "I like what I know." That is more uncomfortable because it reveals how much of our taste is simply habit. We like what fits us, confirms our world, and does not ask us to change. It happens with music too. I know this because I used to be close-minded about music. When I was younger, I wanted feelings I could recognize, structure I could follow, emotion that announced itself clearly. Jazz did not do that for me, especially the bebop and Coltrane records I heard when I was younger. I thought it had no melody, no structure, no emotional center I could hold on to. Then, in college, after a long day in the painting studio, someone put on John Coltrane's Giant Steps. At first, it was simply there in the background while I worked. The first time through, it still sounded strange, but then it played again and again. And after a while, something changed. It did not become simple or easy, but I started to hear something in it. Unpredictable, but not random. Difficult, but not empty. Restless, but not meaningless. The very thing that made me reject it, its unfamiliarity, became the thing that made it interesting. Some art gives itself quickly. Other art resists us. It asks us to stay. And sometimes the things we like easily are not the things we love for long. Some works please us quickly and disappear. Others trouble us at first, but stay with us. Art does not always fail because it has nothing to say. Sometimes we are simply not ready to listen. Our first reaction is not always our deepest one. Sometimes "I don't like this" really means "I don't know how to receive this yet." But the opposite is also true. A work of art does not have to be difficult to be profound. Hank Williams once said the success of his kind of music came down to one word: sincerity. A song can be simple. It can use familiar chords. It can tell an ordinary story about heartbreak, loneliness, home, or loss. But if it feels lived, it can reach us. Coltrane asks us to stay with complexity. Hank Williams asks us not to mistake simplicity for shallowness. Both challenge the habit of deciding too quickly what is serious or worthy of our attention. Even a work that seems silly, childish, or corny can become meaningful if we are willing to become participants instead of tourists. Paintings, sculptures, buildings, films, poems, and songs reveal themselves differently. Some hit immediately, some unfold slowly, but all ask for attention. And that is difficult now. We live in a world built around speed, comfort, control, and spectacle. Art is often reduced to a headline, a price tag, a social media moment, or a name to collect. In that world, cynicism can feel like intelligence. But cynicism can become its own kind of protection. It seals us off from the experience, certain we have seen through it, rather than asking whether something might still have the power to reach us. The phone, the inbox, the feed, the next task, everything is screaming for attention. Slowly, we lose one of the most important human abilities, the ability to pause, to sit still, to look without swiping, to listen without judging, and to remain long enough for it to work on us. The best teaching in criticism does not replace the experience of art. It returns us to it. I remember once playing a recording of the poet James Dickey reading his poems for a college drawing class while the students worked. To me, it was powerful. The voice, the rhythm, the strange force of language spoken aloud. But several students began to giggle. Laughter can be a way of keeping something at a distance, especially when taking it seriously might make us feel exposed. That moment taught me something. Enthusiasm is vulnerable. When you love something openly, you risk looking foolish. That is why irony, sarcasm, and quick judgment can feel safer than caring too much. Think about leaving a movie theater after seeing something beautiful. You walk out still carrying it, eyes wet, quiet, touched by something too deep to summarize. For a moment, you felt less alone inside. Art takes something private, grief, longing, fear, hope, and reveals it as something shared. What we thought belonged only to us is part of the human condition. Nothing concentrates the mind like death. Faced with loss, the fragility of being alive, and the limits of our time, we urgently reach for language, poetry, music, and images, trying to give form to our sorrows and make life bearable. And in them, we recognize ourselves. This is why beauty can hurt. Beauty does not always comfort us by making life easier. Sometimes it comforts us by making life more real. Van Gogh understood this. He did not want his paintings to be admired only for their technique. He wanted them to carry the force of a life felt deeply and tenderly. That may be one of the simplest and most profound things art can do: restore feeling to us. This is why the arts and humanities matter. Not because students need to memorize every painter, style, date, or monument, but because art gives us practice and attention. It trains us to enter worlds beyond our own: a cave painting, an Egyptian tomb, a Greek statue, a blues song, a Mexican mural, music we once thought we were too sophisticated to enjoy. Each asks us to cross some distance: historical, cultural, emotional, or simply the distance between a first reaction and a deeper response. That distance is where the humanities live. And in a world that constantly gives us more of what we already want, that distance matters. So maybe the first question in front of a work of art is not simply, "What is this?" but "What can I discover here?" There's a difference between looking and seeing. Looking can be mechanical. We glance, identify, judge, and move on. But seeing requires more from us. It asks us to bring our attention, our memories, our experiences, our wounds, our questions, our whole selves to the encounter. Art invites us to surrender. That word can sound almost religious because surrendering to art requires humility. It means admitting that the world is larger than our preferences, and that a work may have something to offer before we decide what it's worth. Surrendering to art does not mean turning off judgment. It means postponing judgment long enough to give the work a chance. The work may not change, but you might.